Alright, we're going to start here on Chapter 2, Video 4. We're going to talk a little bit more about Andrew Jackson and what he is going to do as president. After that, we're going to talk about the new political party that's going to emerge to rival the Democrats. And then lastly, we'll talk about the women's rights movement, how that's starting to kick off kind of around this time period in the middle to late 1800s. So the first one, as it's called on there, is the Native American Removal Act. And this is definitely one of the worst things to happen in American history, and quite frankly, in my opinion, never should have happened. So a little bit of background. We talked a lot already about what was happening and the biggest issue in the United States about this time period, and that is whether or not slavery should expand, should it be legal, should it be taken away. But Andrew Jackson didn't really put his efforts towards that. His effort was to remove Native American from land that was most likely already guaranteed to them in various treaties and make way for different settlers as they started to move more and more west. So, 1830, Andrew Jackson is going to sign what is known as the Indian Removal Act. And what this does, and I have the definition on there, it says they want to relocate Native Americans to areas uninhabited west of the Mississippi River. So, again, as I already talked about, as I already said, most of this land was already guaranteed by treaties. Most of it was already guaranteed in many, many different ways. But he is going to make various different tribes move to west of the Mississippi River. Now, as most people would probably say that they would not want to have to do this regardless of ethnicity, the Cherokee, they appeal it to the Supreme Court. Now, as you're kind of looking at this, you're probably thinking, Native American tribes early on have not been very successful in the court system. The Supreme Court is picked by the President, approved by the Senate. So you're probably thinking early on, the Supreme Court, they are not going to be on the side of the Cherokee. But it's going to be the exact opposite. The Supreme Court says the Cherokee, they have a right to the land. They have a right to stay there. And that is a part of our checks and balances. President signed a law, or Congress created this law, President signs it. Now the Supreme Court comes in and says a law like this is extremely unconstitutional. That's the way our system's supposed to work. That's the way our checks and balances and the separation of powers, that's the way that they are supposed to work together. However, Andrew Jackson goes against it. He says that the Supreme Court has made their decision. Now try to enforce it. The enforcement of the laws, that falls upon the executive branch. That falls upon President Andrew Jackson. So, not following the rules, not following the decision made by the Supreme Court in 1838, Martin Van Buren is going to send in the army to forcibly move the Cherokee to west of the Mississippi. That is known as the Trail of Tears. Now, while they were waiting at this relocation camp, about 2,000 Native Americans were killed on the march, where they were given hardly any medical treatment, hardly any food, hardly any of the basic necessities you need for life. Another 2,000 were killed. This shows one of the biggest flaws in the Constitution. The Supreme Court made a decision. They can't enforce it. They can't make somebody enforce it. That's up to the executive branch. So it shows that this clash between the Native Americans, this clash between the Supreme Court and the executive branch and the President is going to have the upper hand. Now this new party is going to emerge because Andrew Jackson, he was, I guess you could say he was well liked enough to win 2 separate terms for office, but he still had a lot of people that were against him. A lot of people did not think, as he talked about the Native American Removal Act, the Trail of Tears, that never should have happened. People are going to oppose him, and they're going to form their own party. They are going to be known as the Whigs. Now, a couple of things they want to do. They want to expand government. Democrats were kind of a little bit more, they wanted it close-knit, they wanted the spoils system, they wanted to make sure they had people in charge that they trusted that were part of their political party. But the Whigs, they want to expand the government. They want to change the economy. They want to centralize it. And they also want to encourage more development. Now, as far as development, we talked about the Industrial Revolution, but this idea of development starts to change to roads, starts to change for canals, basically start to transform how people are going to be able to get from place to place. And they want to encourage that development because they want to make life as easy as possible. Now, the Whigs early on, and as they run for president, aren't going to be successful. One of the biggest reasons that they're unsuccessful, in 1836, they run 3 separate people to become president. Martin Van Buren, he was a part of the Andrew Jackson presidency. Andrew Jackson pretty much handpicks him, so he is going to win and he is going to take over as president. However, once he takes over, there's going to be a panic. And a panic is a term to talk about the economy. And it's going to refer to like a depression, a fear. And this was pretty much started by Andrew Jackson, because Andrew Jackson, knowing that people were starting to take over more and more land, that they were starting to buy it, people were not really trusting this idea of paper money and credit. So he created a new law that said, if you want to buy this, you have to buy it in either gold or silver. Now the banks that relied on this paper currency, they started to become very fearful. So a panic started to take place. Martin Van Buren, as he is in office, his idea of a president is much different, almost like George Washington-like, where he thinks that the economy will take care of itself. I really don't need to step in here. I really don't need to make a decision here. So a panic is going to take place. Martin Van Buren doesn't really do much to stop it. And because of that reason, in 1840, the Democrats, they're going to be out of office, and a new person wins. In 1840, William Henry Harrison is elected as the president. He wins this very, very easily. Now, of the time period, he is the oldest elected president. So I'll ask the question, and I'll ask this to you guys in class tomorrow. Does anyone know who is the oldest president today? Who is the oldest elected president? Now, when Harrison won, people questioned, he's too old, he's not strong enough, he doesn't have the stamina to become president. Therefore, he gave the longest inaugural address in history. To prove he was tough, he gave a 2-hour speech. He gave that 2-hour speech in the middle of a blizzard. So he holds the record for the longest speech. He held the record for oldest person elected into office, and he also holds the shortest office record. During that speech, he got pneumonia. And 30 days after, he died in office. So as we know, president dies, vice president takes over. So as Harrison dies in office, John Tyler is going to take over and become the next president of the United States. And the last one up today is the women's movement. Now, we talked about voting rights and how they start to change. And early on, kind of talked about throughout history, revolutionary time period, you had to be white, you had to own property, pay taxes, and then you could vote. Now it's, okay, if you're a citizen, you pay taxes, you're a male, you're able to vote. Now, the women's movement is going to kind of start to change that a little bit. Now, women, they first started to petition for educational opportunities. Because unless you were upper class, unless you had a lot of money, women, unfortunately, they were not given the opportunity to go to school. Social conditions, or I guess people's morals and philosophies thought that women, they were supposed to stay in the home. And they backed that up by saying outside of the home it's dangerous, it's not safe to go outside, therefore the home is the proper place for the women. So this idea of starting to change this role and starting to get different jobs is going to be kind of around this early to late 1830s, all the way up until the 1900s, when women finally get the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. But 1837, that's when the first all-women's school is going to be put into place, be put into practice. So some of those petitioning is starting to be successful. Now, in 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention was a gathering of reformers. And Katie Stanton is going to be the kind of most famous person there. Susan B. Anthony is also going to be there, but they are going to start to push for something known as suffrage. And that's a term I've used before. When we hear the term suffrage, you probably think it's a negative, but all it is, it's voting rights. So Katie Stanton starts to push for this idea of voting rights. And then at this convention, they also issue something known as the Seneca Falls Declaration, which it starts off word for word like the Declaration of Independence. And that is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and they make the addition, and women are created equal. At this time period, not everyone was treated equal. Men, based upon ethnicity, based upon skin color, were treated differently. Now, the push is to kind of make it for everyone of every race. also of every gender. So make sure to have your discussion question. I'll ask you guys tomorrow if you know who the oldest president is. Don't look it up. We'll try to have this discussion, try to make it a game tomorrow in class.